I think the public health campaign to get the information out there is working. The more informed we are about these things, the better we are at spotting it at an early stage, which is the acute stage. And if we can spot any problem at an earlier stage, the acute stage, we can generally knock it on the head and mean that it's not coming back. The problem comes if we don't recognize the symptoms, we tolerate and cope with something over a long time, it then becomes very chronic, and then you get lots of other associated problems because of it, which are avoidable, such as problems at work, problems with relationships. You may start to use other substances to sort of try and manage some of the symptoms, and then you get into a very complex situation indeed. So it's great that this morning we're talking about this and getting it out there, but what I want to say is that doesn't mean that more of us necessarily getting anxious. It just means that we're becoming more aware of it. And as we become more aware of it, we actually combat it a lot better. So it's great to have this. In terms of the population figures, in 2013, we estimate about 8 million people in the UK had anxiety, which is quite a lot, because it is actually, this and depression is one of the most common mental health problems. The great thing about that is that we know a lot about it, and there's an awful lot of things that we can do about it.
How do we? Sorry to interrupt you. But first things first, how do we define anxiety? Because it's one of those words you can say, "Oh, I'm a bit anxious about going into work today. I'm a bit anxious about going on this plane." At what point is anxiety part of everyday life and almost necessary in many ways to function? Or at what point does it become a problem?
We do for a clinical assessment, say you've got anxiety, as opposed to you just having a normal sort of physiological reaction to a situation of fear. So if you're going into an exam or you're getting on a plane or something like that, you may have some anxiety about that, but it's relatively short-lived for the period or the duration of the event. What we're talking about in terms of anxiety as a clinical problem is it goes beyond the duration of the event and starts to interfere with your everyday functioning. It's what's called the threat system in us is activated, but it stays on as opposed to switching off once we've gone past the event. And generally, when we're assessing people to see if it is possibly an issue, the sort of timescale we're looking at is over the last couple of weeks. So over the last couple of weeks, have you been sort of bothered by the sort of symptoms? And the sort of symptoms we're talking about, they fall into 7 groupings. So feelings of nervousness, anxiety, or being on edge, not being able to stop or control things that you're worrying about a lot of different things at the same time, having trouble relaxing, being so restless that it's hard to sit still, becoming easily annoyed or irritable, feeling afraid as if something awful might happen. And often that's not a sense of a specific thing might happen, but a general sense that, oh, something bad is just about to happen to me, which colours all your experience of things. Those are sort of the 7 symptoms, if you like, when we're looking at people that might have an anxiety disorder that needs some intervention and some help. But somebody who has some anxiety about, a job interview or something, that's not a problem. That's a sort of natural, normal response to a potentially sort of stressful situation.
And how much
that
of
level
this,
of anxiety can be quite helpful, to be honest.
How much of this is being triggered, Noel, by modern life? It's very easy to fall back, I know, and use it almost as an excuse to say, well, it's technology, isn't it? We can blame technology for everything. But it does play a big part, doesn't it, the always-on society that we live in now?
I think we have a lot of stimulus going on, a lot of interruptions to our general sense of well-being and relaxedness. And one of the issues that we have in modern life is that our lifestyle is such that many things may trigger us, but we aren't noticing that we're being triggered by these events. So we may walk out and something may beep at us angrily or something like that, which will activate the threat system. We may see something on television that really upsets us. We may see something on the computer, etc., etc. There's many things like that that can trigger this sort of threat mechanism response. And we don't recognize that we are in that threat response. And because we don't recognize it, we don't do the things to take ourselves out of it. So this just builds up and builds up and builds up. And in some people, it builds up to the point where they've trained themselves into being, if you like, trigger happy, around events in life, and that they respond with this sort of adrenaline rush and cortisol rush in the bloodstream, which gets you into what we call a fight, flight, freeze situation. And some people may have heard that. And so you can train yourself over a period of time, if you like, behaviorally train yourself into sort of having these reactions which grow and grow and grow till they become overreactions. So yes, you're right. There's a lot of potentially triggering events in modern life which we don't recognize that, oh, my body has just perceived that as a threat to me, because it would be ridiculous.